Hi there! In this video, we are going to see how to plan a vocabulary lesson. First, we start with a review of principles and techniques in teaching vocabulary. Then, we will look at a sample lesson plan designed to teach a language section of the new textbook, Tiếng Anh 7. We will have a chance to understand how the section is designed and organized. And then, we are going to discuss the activities in the lesson and the adaptations the lesson plan has made for the section. Now, let's begin with the theory review. To start with, let's think about what does it mean to know a word. At the most basic level, knowing a word involves knowing its form and its meaning. However, knowing the meaning of a word is not just knowing its dictionary meaning or meanings. It also means knowing the words commonly associated with it or its collocations, as well as its connotations, or in other words, its register, formality and style, and also cultural meanings. Knowing a word also means you have productive knowledge of it, which means you can produce it, not only understand it. So, in teaching vocabulary, teachers should pay attention to all these factors to embed all in teaching a vocabulary item. So, how can students remember words? Researchers distinguish three systems: the short-term store, working memory, and long-term memory. The short-term store is the brain's capacity to hold a limited number of items of information for a period of time up to a few seconds. For example, students can remember a word to repeat after they have just heard the teacher modeling. But, as you can see, successful vocabulary learning clearly involves more than simply holding words in your minds for a few seconds, right? Focusing on words long enough to perform operations on them is the function of working memory. In this kind of memory, information is first placed and then studied. That means the student think about that word. Long-term memory can be thought of as a kind of filing system. In order to move words into permanent long-term memory, a number of principles need to be observed. For example, repetition, imaging, personal organizing, motivation, and use. That means the students have to use the word. Now, how to present vocabulary. As a teacher, we need to decide on a number of factors in a vocabulary lesson. The first factor, it should be how many vocabulary items to teach. Well, this quite depends on the level of learners. The learners' likely familiarity with the words, the diversity of items, and the teachability, that is, whether they can be easily explained or demonstrated, or whether the items are for production or for recognition only. Then comes the choice of sequence of presentation, either meaning first and then form, or form first and then meaning. Both approaches are valid. Presenting the meaning first can create a need for form, and making the presentation both more efficient and more memorable. On the other hand, form-first presentation works best when there is some kind of context in which a word appears, so that students can figure out the meaning themselves. The next choice is the means of presentation. There are many ways teacher can choose. That is to present through translation, real things, pictures, actions or gestures, definitions or situations. And teacher can decide to present whether in spoken form or written form. The choice of presentation depends on the word which is presented and students' level and also learning styles. After presenting new vocabulary items, it is essential that teacher help students to memorize them, or in other words, help them to move words to long-term memory. But how can we do this? Thornberry suggested integration activities as follows. The first type is decision-making tasks. They are tasks in which learners make decisions about words. They are identifying, selecting, matching, sorting, ranking, and sequencing. These tasks are arranged from least cognitively demanding to most demanding. For example, with identifying, students only need to find the words in the text. But for ranking and sequencing, students need to put the words in some kind of order. For example, it can be order of preference or time order of things a person does when traveling by airplane. As you can see, with decision-making tasks, students only make judgments about the words, but don't produce them. So, in order for students to use words, it is essential to include production tasks. Production tasks are those in which the learners are required to incorporate the newly studied words into some kind of speaking or writing activity. There are two main types: completion of sentences or text and creation of sentences or text. Completion tasks are also known as gap fills. Creation tasks require learners to create the context for given words. For example, use the words to make a sentence. Choose words from the list and write a sentence. Write a short narrative or dialogue. The narrative or dialogue should include words from a given list. So, we have just together reviewed some principles and techniques in teaching vocabulary. Now, let's have a look at the section we are going to have a lesson plan for. This is an extract from Tiếng Anh 7, Tập 1, Unit 4, Music and Arts. Lesson A Closer Look When. This section deals with vocabulary and pronunciation. In vocabulary part, there are 4 tasks, as you can see. Exercise 1, listen and repeat. Exercise 2, matching. Exercise 3, jumbled words and matching words with visuals. Exercise 4, gap filling with words provided. As you can see, the activities are all controlled practice. The requirement for students is quite limited, with repeating, matching, categorizing, and underlining. The answers are restricted to right or wrong answer. The level of thinking and cognitive development is only imitating, recognizing, and memorizing. This section lacks more activities to boost the application of the language items learned. And one more thing, it needs more stirring up activities to get students more excited to learn instead of feeling bored, sitting and doing exercise and checking keys all the time. So, as a teacher, you need to do something to bridge the gap. and help students to have more chances to use the language. What will I do? The lesson plan follows skill integration approach. It emphasizes that learning vocabulary is not only about memorizing words, but to speak and listen to others effectively. The lesson plan also reflects the notion of CLT, or you know it, communicative language teaching in learning vocabulary. That is, when learning vocabulary, teachers should organize activity in which students can use vocabulary. So, the first change is the addition of the warm-up activity. Who is he or she? Obviously, teacher cannot start the lesson by going to the classroom and ask students to open the book and listen and repeat right away. Just imagine how negative feelings it will create for the lesson. But you also agree that the warm-up activity is not just for fun. In this activity, teacher prepares 4 pictures of famous people in music and arts. Class is divided into 2 groups. One representative from each group to look at and describe the pictures. Others guess. With students describing the pictures of famous people in music and arts, teacher can successfully lead in the lesson, let students think about the topic and activate their background knowledge. He or she can also provide link to the previous lesson, and more importantly, teacher can check students' vocabulary related to the topic to see what vocabulary students have already known and what requires some more teaching. With these purposes in mind, some other options to start the lesson could be the word net, in which students brainstorm words related to the topic of the lesson, or leading questions, in which teacher can ask about students' favorite singer, band, or songs, or guessing game, in which students think about their own singer and artist and provide hints for their friends to guess. The next adaptation is the activity making full sentences. As you may know, after 2 exercises of repeating and matching, students need to have some change. And more importantly, they need to use the vocabulary learned. This activity is rather controlled, but it also gives students some freedom in choosing any words or phrases they like. To make the atmosphere more lively, teacher can let students play the game Toss the Ball. Do you know this? Simply make a paper ball, then teacher makes a sentence. For example, a painter draws a portrait. A photographer takes a photo. Next, teacher throws it to a student. The student catching the ball has to make another full sentence, and then throw the ball to another student. By doing this, students can reinforce vocabulary learned in exercises 1 and 2. The next big change is the addition of one speaking activity at the end of the vocabulary part. This activity requires students to provide their own ranking of musical instruments by answering 2 questions. 1. Which instrument do you like to learn most? And which instrument is hardest to play? This activity, as you can recognize, is a communicative one in which teacher does not control the language and content of what students say. Students can fully choose the vocabulary learned to talk about their own ideas. This kind of communicative and personalizing task is essential for students to take their cognitive development to the next level, which is application. So, we have just discussed about the adaptation of teaching one vocabulary section in a new textbook. I hope that those ideas will give you practical suggestions for your future planning. For more details, please read the detailed lesson plan.